Hello, everyone, and good afternoon. This is your host, Gabriel Garcia, otherwise known as the Wandering Quill and the Wandering Scribe, and welcome to another author interview. Now, my guest today is a first timer here on the channel, and I'm super excited to have them on the show. Originally from Kingsville, Texas, my guest has since settled in the sunny locale of Odessa, Florida. Immediately after high school, he exchanged his textbooks for military fatigue, serving honorably in the United States Army for over 14 years. His distinctive writing style is infused with the valuable insights he gained during service. While his initial ambition was to pursue a degree in literature, practical considerations led him to a more lucrative field, earning him a bachelor's in management information systems. For the past 2 decades, my guest has thrived in the tech-centered world of software sales, working with numerous networking and cybersecurity companies. But on the other side, he's also a passionate writer, specializing in science fiction, fantasy, and military novels. And has since then channeled his interest into writing stories designed to ignite the imagination. And to top it all off, we'll be talking about his upcoming debut novel, which is set to release next month. And to tell us all about that and more, let's give a huge round of applause to aspiring author and Army veteran, Mr. Darryl Paulk. Darryl, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Thank you for having me.
Awesome. So before we dive into your book, is there anything else you'd like to add about your background, anything in particular?
No, I really think that pretty much summed up the highlights.
Awesome. So I've been seeing all of your posts on your social media for your upcoming novel. Can you share with the viewers and listeners the debut book that'll be coming out, which will be the start of your trilogy?
Correct. So, so this has been a labor of love I've been working on for quite some time. It started off as a hobby, but essentially, I've always wanted to write. What this book is about it's about two strong heroines, both a female and male protagonist, and they are a couple, and they get thrown into a set of circumstances that they're unprepared for. Kind of typical in life. A lot of times we get thrown in these types of circumstances. But I don't want to reveal too much of it. But essentially, there is something special about the main protagonist, Leffel. And so you have all of these people that are after him. And so part of the book is a little bit of mystery, but it's mostly science fiction fantasy.
Nice, I don't know if that's nice. No, that is that is actually a good teaser. As you said, you don't want to spoil too much. You want to save it just so when the release comes out. So let's go back a little bit in your history. So growing up, were you always interested in writing, in creating stories, or did that come about later? And as you said before, like this story was a labor of love. Now, was the story already with you in the very beginning, or did the story sort of evolve over a series of years and had taken on different shapes in the past?
So it actually started off as a school project. I kind of told you that originally I kind of wanted to get my degree in literature. And as I was going through my courses in my creative writing class, I started to write about Leffel. And so it just kind of grew from there. After I initially wrote what was like a short story, I decided it really wasn't enough and it didn't do enough justice to the character. And the more I got into it, it became, a chapter, 10 chapters, eventually 27 chapters.
Wow. My goodness. That is actually really, really incredible. And you know what? You're actually probably, I like to say, in a group of authors I've interviewed whose debut works had evolved from school projects, because I think that's always the most fascinating thing, where it started off as like, either an assignment or a little activity, and it has evolved into something more, and it's taken on its own identity. So now let's fast forward a little bit now. So once you decided you wanted to create this story and share it with others down the road, what was the goal you had when creating the story, as well as the need you want to satisfy for your future readers?
So I actually didn't start off with this grand idea that I was going to write this novel and get it published and, you know, um, you know, be a recognized author. I originally started off writing the story for my daughters. So I've got three daughters,
Ah,
and I have a son too. So I have a son and three daughters. But I started off writing it for them, and um, I think that's, you know, once I had it almost to completion and I was going through like all the editing, my family came up and said, "This is really just too good of a story just to keep it in the family." And I think that's where kind of my dreams, kind of grew.
nice. And again, you're probably now the second guest I have on the show that said that their story was created in part due to like family. My previous guest, shout out to M Fire, her story got started because her daughter kind of called her out saying, "I'll do this if you write your story." So
That's
her
pretty
daughter
awesome.
called her out, so she had to do it. But
Yeah.
that's really, really fascinating. So when you began crafting this world and the characters, did you do any arc readers, beta readers to help the story progress? And if so, what was the feedback like from them?
So I didn't do it as far as any beta readers. The reason why my release date is August 31st is because we did release it on ARC. In fact, if any would like to still read it, it's still available. You can still go on there. There's still a few slots left. But yeah, so we opened it for ARC for just basically to generate some reviews, to get some, honestly, to get some feedback from me so I can have a good understanding of what my potential was. I mean, it's one thing for your family to say, "Hey, I really like what you've done," but it's really different, when other people, that don't have those family biases read it and
Right.
critique it. So that's kind of what we're doing right now. I've got it out there on Book Sirens so that it can be, you know, actually read and I can get some live feedback before I actually publish it.
Nice. And from the initial reviews, I don't know if people have already messaged you, like if they're already halfway through the book or they're like still in the beginnings, but from those interactions, have they been like positive, mixed? And is there one early review that stands out to you? And from those early interactions, do they, in a way, sort of validate the purpose and the goal you had with the creation of this story?
So I've got 9 reviews pending right now, out of 10 total ARC readers. And I'm sorry if you hear my dog barking in the background. I apologize for
You're
that.
good.
But so I've only had one published review so far. It stung a little bit. The guy that graded me, I would tell you, he gave me some incredible feedback. He gave me 3 out of 5 stars. If you go and you read it and you look at his you know how he's rated on Book Sirens, he's a really strict reviewer. So I kind of take it that if he gave me 3 out of 5 stars, being a super strict reviewer, I'm hoping that some of the following reviews will be a little bit higher. But overall, I would say I took from it that one of the key things in his message was like, "Hey, Darryl, you are a writer. I just wish I could have seen a little bit more of this, this, and this." So overall, I don't think it was anything negative. I thought it was very constructive, and I'm looking forward to the other reviews.
Yeah, and that's, I think, which we'll touch on later down the road. But I think that is very important when you get like those very critical reviews, which are good. It's good when, if someone does rate your book at a level that you're not expecting, but gives you the feedback as to why. That I think is better than someone just marking your book or rating your book at a less level and then not giving any feedback to improve upon, because that's just being rude and disrespectful. Like, critiques are critiques, but you never want to insult the author or stuff like that.
Yeah, and he did a really good job of saying, "Hey, here are the things I think you just could have made the book better." And I really appreciated that from him. And I am taking that into consideration, because I am like 85% through my second book that I'm trying to get released, you know, by the
Right.
year's, end.
Definitely.
I'm
And you know what?
nervous. I don't know if it's showing, but so
You know what? I completely understand. And I'm actually going through my own thing now with my third book. I'm now actually doing like ARC applications, which I'm just fine tuning the application itself. I've never done that for my other two books, so this is all very new to me. So I can understand that feeling, and that actually kind of leads into now the next question, which is the first reflective question. So, as I'm sure you would definitely agree, Daryl, that being an author is a very lonely feeling, in the sense that it's spending hours and hours on a project that you're passionate about, editing, reviewing, finding an editor to do the edits who will be critical but still be fair, finding a cover artist whose style matches the tone of the book, and then uh, publishing it right out there, or holding back and just like waiting to do like reviews or any other format. And then when you do release it or something like that, there's that voice in the back of every author's mind, that voice of imposter syndrome, just saying, "What are you doing? No one's going to read this." And it's very detrimental, and it's very hurtful for
y-
anyone in the creative world.
it's it puts you in a very vulnerable place
Mm,
because, let's face it, people today with all social media and everything that goes on, people are callous and people say things and they don't really think about how it's going to impact the person that they've said it to. They're pixels behind a screen. They just kind of say it out there without any kind of really care or concern of how it comes across. So, yeah, I can sympathize with what you're saying, because, as an artist, once we publish that, we become a target, and
definitely.
it can be tough. Yeah,
It
getting
it
that
is.
feedback.
It definitely is. So for you, Daryl, have you ever had like those moments of imposter syndrome, even before developing the book to where it is now? And if not, what has continued to discipline you to continue talking about the story, and also, as you said, working on the second book because you are passionate about this story?
I am passionate about it, and it's funny because I get excited because I'm not exactly sure what's going to happen next. I write outlines, and so I have like this whole direction that I want the story to go, but sometimes you just get on a roll and that direction changes.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes I wonder if I've got like, and I'm being silly here, but sometimes I wonder if I've got like split personality or multiple personalities, because when I'm writing this, I feel like sometimes like, you know, I have to get into these different character roles in my, to really like, show their personalities. It's fun.
Definitely.
I don't know how to explain it. I enjoy it. But you're right, it is lonely. There's no feedback. You're sitting there by yourself, often for hours at a time, just kind of going through materials, and then the rewrites are the worst, because every time you write
Yes.
something, you go back and say, "Oh, that didn't make sense," and you rewrite it and rewrite it. And sometimes I think that can be bad, because sometimes it's great as it is, and when you think too much about it, you can actually ruin it. So
You know
it's
what?
it's a it's a balance.
That is completely true. And you know what? It is a very daunting, especially when you go into now, leads perfectly into the business side of being an author, because
Yes.
when you have the creative mind, its sole purpose is to create the story. When the business side shows up, that's when it's like, okay, what route am I going to? Am I going independent publishing, traditional publishing. Okay, then from there, who am I going to find to be the editor? Who's going to find to be the cover artist and stuff like that? It's all of these different things which can overwhelm any first-time author. So let's actually start with the first part. So for you, Darryl, when you finish penning the story, like it's been edited, you have the cover, it's exactly where you want to be. Did you want to go the route of independent publishing because you would have more creative control over it because you know the story better than anyone else? Or did you try your hand initially at traditional publishing and do a little research into some of the publishing houses who specialize in the genre that you are writing for?
So I think every author wants to be traditionally published. I think it's much more of a challenge these days because the outlets for these, for new authors, it's difficult to break into. It's gotten smaller. Even Barnes and Noble and some of the places where you traditionally get your books, they've closed stores. They've tried to rebrand themselves. So, the amount of traditional books that are being sold, I think is shrinking through traditional means. And now
Yes.
more people are going to like Amazon, Kindle, Barnes and Noble, Nook, those things to consume their books. And so it's a different market than what it was. And I'm not saying that, I would love to still be traditionally published, but I just don't think it's in the cards.
Yeah, it is. And I also remember one of my guests even saying that there's almost like, for some houses, these gatekeepers who sort of say that, oh, this book really isn't what we're looking for, because not to dissuade anyone from going traditional publishing, there are numerous routes, independent, hybrid, and traditional, but it's always good to know the business side behind each. For traditional publishing, it's pretty much self-explanatory. It is a business. You are presenting a product to a house with
Yeah.
the aim of making money. And if your book doesn't make money, unfortunately, the house does have to cut you and drop you. And as tough as it may be to say that, it is entirely true. For
Yeah.
independent publishing, yes, you have more creative control over your story and you can market your book however you want. But keyword, market your book. That's a business in of itself and a job, because you have to market it all on social media. You have to make banners for it. You have to talk about it. And even before that, you have to find the right artists who make the designs,
It's
find editors, and all that stuff.
it's as much work as actually writing the book itself. In fact, I'd probably say it's harder because at least with a book, it's my creativity, my time. But marketing, you have to do so much more to entice people to it. It's tough. So
It
I think
is.
that is the hardest part of any, I'd say, a challenge to any author today. Um, when I first took my book to an editor, I took it to a gentleman by the name of Keith Farrell. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Keith Farrell. He was the editor for Omni Magazine back in the day, and he was the one. He was my original editor, and he told me, he's like, when he first did this, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, he's like, Darryl, I probably could have got you traditionally published. He goes, but in this today's market, it's just too competitive. You know,
Mm-hmm.
most of these traditional publishers, they're focused on their money makers, and they'll keep republishing them, and it's really hard to be a new artist to break into them. But kind of circling back to the point I wanted to make was, um, when you have a good editor, I don't know if you know, but Keith Farrell passed away,
Mm.
and and you have to switch to another one. It's incredibly difficult because you get used to a certain editor and the way that they work, and then you go to a new editor, and if their style is totally different, I mean, it's almost like a rewrite to the entire book. It's crazy.
Definitely. That is actually 100% true, because you build a rapport with the editor. You know their style, you know what they're going to be expecting. But when you work with a different editor, it is entirely different. Like you said, it's rewriting the entire book, which actually then leads perfectly into the next set of questions, which now focuses on the audience for the story. And I think it is important to discuss about the audience because, For us, we write the story for ourselves initially because we enjoy these stories. But if we want to share them with others, we really have to understand, okay, what exactly is the genre that I'm writing for, and who is the target audience within said genre? Once you have that in mind, then you can figure out, okay, does my book fall within the parameters of the genre, and does it hit the target audience? Now, 9 times out of 10 is not going to hit exactly, but you want to get a good amount. So for you, Darryl, in your own opinion, how important is it for an author to understand their audience for their story? And from your reviewers, from the 10 ARC reviewers, do you have a good understanding of your audience from them?
So I would say that, understanding the audience that you want to read your book is actually the first thing you should know before you actually start the book. And I
Mm-hmm.
didn't quite go down that route. I wish I had. Kind of hindsight. It's important because if you don't really understand the audience you're writing for, it's really hard for you to create a compelling book that they're going to want to read. I kind of migrated in the middle. So originally it was high fantasy, you know, and it really kind of became more young adult fantasy. I still like to
Mm.
think it's high fantasy, but my daughter keeps correcting me and telling me otherwise. So,
Or new adult, as I've been told, that's the new
or new
popular
adult.
genre now.
Yeah. So,
But yeah, you're absolutely right. Knowing the audience before you write the book is very important because you do get an idea. And also, stories do change over time. You know, the first
yeah.
draft of the story is not going to be the same as the final draft, and the audience could also change in that process as well. And also, something we didn't talk about, but leading into this now, for all of us, we're always inspired by the authors that we read, and we always take little bits and pieces. But one author wanted to counter that and said, well, I am inspired by Stephen King. Stephen King is his favorite author. I didn't want to take any elements or narrative tropes or types from Stephen King and plant into my own because I'm not trying to be a Stephen King. I'm trying to be myself because when you pick up a Stephen King book, you know what to expect. He
Yeah.
wanted to have that same feeling for his books. So for you, Darryl, who would you say are the authors and books that really helped you hone into your position as an author, you know, in terms of like character development, narrative style, narrative structure, to where you can now say, this is my book, and this is what people who pick this book up will learn about me as a writer?
Um, I'm kind of all over the board when it comes to like, authors that I really think help inspire me and shape me into the author that I want to be. I hope to become, when I grow up. So, um, but most of the writers that I truly loved, most of them have passed away. Those would be
Mm,
authors like Roger Zelazny, L. Ron Hubbard, Robert
yes,
Jordan, um, Tom Clancy.
yes.
So,
But yeah, it is actually that's I've only read a few of their works, well, specifically Tom Clancy, now getting into his the Rainbow Six series, which is so far very, very good. And I've actually met another author who was also hugely inspired by Tom Clancy, that he wanted to make, in a way, an homage to the Tom Clancy stories, but have his own style to it, which I think is always very fascinating. And now, kind of leading into the next question, which is a little bit interesting, is the readership. Now, the reason I bring this up is that, you know, readers and audience, people think, well, they're the same. Not necessarily. You can target a specific audience within the publishing world, but
yeah.
the readership can be vastly different. You can have hardcore science fiction fans. You can have people who are now getting into the sci-fi genre for the very, very first time. This could be their first book. You can even have people who've grown up with science fiction from the beginning and now reading adult science fiction stories. And that really plays into, okay, who am I marketing to? Because I'm sure you can definitely agree, Darryl, that some books, while they may be target for a specific audience, reading it, it's like this is actually more geared towards a different audience. So for you, would you also agree that just like the audience should be considered before writing, so should the readership? And do you have a good idea of your readership with these 10 reviewers?
I don't know if I really have a good idea of the readership. I've had some good feedback from some of the readers, and typically, um, it, it varies. I've
Mm,
seen some people that have come back and said, "Hey, I really like the action sequences," but most of the readers kind of connect with the two primary protagonists because it's a love story written in in a fantasy world.
right.
So
Definitely. And as you said in the beginning, would you say that your book classifies as a YA novel? And would you say that, because I've had some authors who have been on the show who write in YA, that is probably debatably one of the toughest genres to write for because you're writing for a not severely young audience, but it's almost like that little sweet spot between children and not so much new adults, but it's like right in the middle.
So I wrote a book that I wouldn't be embarrassed if my parents read it. That's the way I look at it.
Okay.
You know, and I'm not calling anyone out, but if you look at like George R. Martin, R. Martin, right? His books are very graphic. I mean, they're great. I mean, they're brilliant. They really are. But you know, that's not kind of what I wanted to shoot for. I wanted something that really all ages could read. There is death and violence in my book, but the language is kept very, very, you know, moderate to light. Like I don't
Right.
overly use foul language. The violence, any epic fantasy adventure, someone's got to die.
Yes.
So I try to write those scenes, trying to keep a broad audience in mind. I don't try to, go for shock value. And
Right.
ultimately, my books I want them to be satisfying, and I believe in happy endings. So I don't know if that's a spoiler, but I believe in happy endings.
Nice, nice. I would have some authors on the show who would disagree with happy endings, but to each their own of how they create, the story and how they choose to end it. So, Olden, would you say, like, as you probably already answered it, but just to like reiterate that your book is almost like in like the middle where people from all ages can enjoy it, where adults can read it, they're going to understand it, and young adults to like teenagers can read it and they'll understand it.
I agree. Yes.
Nice. And
Well,
I
that's a
think it's
good way to
also
summarize it.
nice. I think it's also to discuss this because I'm sure you would definitely agree, Darryl, that especially in the publishing world, as we talk about, it is a very competitive business. And sometimes as authors, we will always want to join, the hype train of what's happening in the publishing world. As I talked about numerous times on the show, viewers and listeners, genres have followers. And the biggest genre right now is romance fantasy. It's read more than any other genre in the publishing world. And sometimes some authors will include other tropes into their story that are not necessarily relevant or important, but just to get on the gravy train. And that can unfortunately derail the story, which then leads to what I like to call the two paths: to be an author and to be known as an author. I said this numerous times on the show, but it is important because both have two different goals. To be an author is an individual who is solely dedicated to the art of storytelling. Capital is not so much the driving force, but it is nice to get some capital back. To be known as an author is an individual who is marketing the book like crazy, going on every platform, sharing it, talking about it, doing everything they can to have people know who they are. And I'm not trying to derail anyone's plans for that, but I'm just saying to go down that path, it is possible, but there's one key thing that you have to understand if you go down that path, and that is this: There's no guarantee for a debut author's first work to be the start of their legacy. Now, there are exceptions to that rule. There are exceptions to that rule. There are numerous authors who have been successful from their first work. But on the other side of the coin, aspiring authors, first-time authors, have those moments where they rise, fall, rise again, and fall even harder. And that, of course, comes to the long-term goals. And one person did say, which is very poetic but very true, is if your muse becomes your source of income, you'll lose your passion, which is very, very true. So, Darryl, in your opinion, from your experiences and also talking with other authors, how important is it for first-time authors to really understand that there is no guarantee that their debut novel is going to be the start of their legacy, in the sense that people are going to know them for that one book, but it should not deter them from creating stories if being a storyteller, being an author, is something they are truly passionate about?
So I feel pretty blessed that I make a good living, what I like to call my real job, not the job that I'm passionate about. Obviously, I'm passionate about writing. Um, so I don't have to, at least I don't think that I have to worry about letting things like making money influence the way that I write. I write for enjoyment, and I'm hopefully creating something that others will enjoy. I think I told you in one of our email exchanges that, if I just get a few people to read the book and come back to me and say, wow, I really enjoyed your story, I think that would be good enough for me. I'd be happy with that.
That's actually the same answer that one of my guests said not too long ago, where her father said, if one person reads your story, you're an author. One person's read it and they love it, they reviewed it. And yes, even though reviews are important, they do generate people's interests. Ultimately, as we said in the beginning, every book is going to cater to a specific reader. If it may not be someone else's, that's completely fine. Yes, it is a passion, but it's not a reflection of who you are, which I think a lot of first-time authors really have that connection to their first project, their debut project. I know I had that thing with my first book, which I got published around, I want to say 2019, 2020. And ultimately, I've now realized, yeah, my first book, which took me 5 years, it's not going to be the start of my legacy as an author, but it did get people interested in knowing who I am and the type of stories that I write. So, add to that, Darryl, would you also agree that at, in terms of being an author, grit and perseverance trumps talent?
Rephrase the question just to make sure I understood it correctly.
Okay. So what I mean is, like, being an author, we talked about, it's a very lonely feeling. It's a very lonely business. It's hours and hours of editing and all that stuff. And yet, the authors that we have admired growing up, those books came about through like hard work, dedication, and years. And yet sometimes you have people who can just naturally just tell a story with ease. They're the best in prose, they can create characters with ease. It's a no-brainer for them. But to say that they aren't going to go through the same struggle as anyone else, that is a lie. Because grit and perseverance help an author grow over time and help us develop our unique writing style to make us different from our contemporaries. So, would you agree, in terms of being an author and like the struggle and the journey, grit and perseverance trumps talent?
I don't know if it would trump talent. Um, I mean, I look at it like, um, if you have talent, um, you know, everybody has a talent for
Right.
something, you know, and if your talent is for writing, then it just comes natural to you. But that doesn't mean that with, dedication and perseverance and feedback that you can't create a talented work art. It just means that we have to work harder at it than those that have that natural talent. So,
Right.
yeah.
Okay, that's actually a different perspective, but thank you for that. And also, to add to that is grit transforms into talent. And going back to what we said about legacy as an author, it may be your 10th book or your 20th book that people best know you for. And when that happens, you can tell people saying, hey, if you enjoy book 20, see 19 all the way down to 1, because then you can tell people, here's my growth as an author. And I think another thing we haven't touched on yet is networking as an author, making connections, meeting new people, and stuff like that, especially in the author community. So, Darryl, can you tell us about some of your interactions with fellow authors and what you've learned from them?
Most of them are very, very encouraging. It it's it's refreshing that, like a lot of times I think, people are guarded in their lives, and if they do something that leads them to success, they don't want to share it. But I think with writing, I think it's different. You know, Authors are very encouraging. They want to see other authors be successful.
Mhm.
Another successful author doesn't take away from their success. So um, I've had nothing but great experiences so far, and I really think this is a welcoming community.
Are there any people in particular that could give a shout out to?
Well, I ordered your book and I read your book. You're one of the authors that I'm working with. Um,
Oh,
but
thank you.
so three of the authors, they're unpublished right now. But if you want to, I can send you links to their works afterwards. But off the top of my head, um, I will butcher their names.
That's completely fair. But yes, please do. At the end, I would very much love to learn more about them. And also, in addition to your family, are there anyone else in your personal life you'd like to give a shout out to who's been supportive of you on this journey?
My entire family. I don't. I can't just say one or the other. They've all been supportive of my writing. So,
Awesome.
and my wife's been my biggest driver to get it completed and get it actually published.
That's nice. That is really, really cool. And it's always really good to have that good support system to like really, really help drive home. And kind of like another question, which I don't really ask a lot, but I'm really interested to hear your thoughts on. Have you ever had or gotten a sense of validation from the fellow authors who you may have told your work about, or may have done the reviews, or maybe the reviewers who are working with you, in the sense that, I am an author? And the reason I bring this question up is that it's one thing to bring your own personal knowledge and experience into an industry for the very first time and just begin working. It's another thing entirely when a fellow peer or a contemporary or superior sees the work and gives credit where credit is due. Because that's also, as again, going back to what I said before, of like the long-term goals, that could be a driving factor as to some reasons why some authors write, is to get a sense of validation from their peers and people who they've admired in the industry.
Yeah, the one author that really has given me the most, um, I guess, kind of inspiration, that goes back to Keith Farrell. He was also the person that edited my book initially. Um, I really can't say that I've had a lot of authors offer that kind of creative feedback.
Mm-hmm.
I'm hoping to get more, because this is really, really kind of hot off the press. So I do expect to get more feedback, or at least I hope so. But I will say that from the feedback that I've gotten from, the initial review that I got off my book, I would say that, it definitely said, hey, you are a writer. You just need to hone some things. And I think that, I got a little bit of validation from that. As much as I took the critique side of it as well, the more
Right.
critical aspects of the review. But
Definitely.
it's a learning experience. I mean, this was my first book. I didn't expect it to go out and be New York Times bestseller. Now hopefully by book 3, you'll have seen the progression of my writing style over the course of the 3 books. And like you said, you were talking about that legacy. Um, I hope, it doesn't take me to book 20 to get there, but
Right.
you know,
That is very, very true. And as one of my other authors said, that at the end of the day, our books are, in a way, our own legacy because they're the things that will outlive us all. There'll be the words that will inspire the next generation. I mean, we have books from Dune, Lord of the Rings, of course, Jack Reacher and the Rainbow Six series, and all the books from the authors that we've admired. I mean, they still live on. That is an everlasting legacy that continues to inspire. I mean, how many authors have been inspired by, the big three: J.K. Rowling, George R. Martin, uh, J.R. Tolkien, and even adding C.S. Lewis. I mean, they're always talked about numerous times because they left an impactful legacy in the field of literature and being an author. And ultimately, at the end of the day, that I think is like the ultimate dream. So the final question before we get to the last one, Darryl, looking back at your life right now with how the story has gone and everything in your own personal growth from penning this story initially from an assignment and then transforming it now into your debut book, have you ever thought to yourself how different your life would be if you were not creating this story, if you were not an author?
you know, that's a good question. I think, you know, writing the book, there's always that optimism that comes with it that, hey, my book's going to hopefully impact somebody else's life, right? Bring some joy and things to them. So I think, throughout my journey, that has really kind of helped inspire me along with my family, their support and stuff like that. So I think if I hadn't been writing this book, there's a lot of times in my life where, I've benefited from that optimism. And so I think, without this book coming through, would it have been different? Yeah, I think so. I don't know to what extent, but I can think back to points in my time where just it's just silly, but I get so caught up in what I'm writing. I'll be writing a chapter and I'll start like, okay, I'm gonna regret saying this, but like I'll start crying because I get so emotionally caught up in the what I'm writing, and that affects you with and some of it's toys tears of joy, but it does, it impacts you as you go about your life and your daily routine. So yeah, I think there'd been a lot darker parts of my
Mm,
life if this book hadn't been involved.
wow, that is very, very powerful. Now arriving at the final question of this very, very impactful interview. So, with everything that you've learned and still learning about the industry and from your own experiences, and with the upcoming release of this book, in your own words, Darryl, what are your uh, words of wisdom to other authors who are watching this interview who want to get a head start in their own journey as an author?
I would say just remember why you started doing it in the first place. You know, what was that spark? What was that, you know, one moment in your life that said, "Hey, I want to write about this." Remember what that was, and don't lose it as you're writing through the book. Don't get sidetracked on, "Oh, wow, I'm going to be a best-selling author and I'm going to have 10,000, 100,000 people read my book." Just remember why you wanted to write the book and continue to write that book for yourself. And I think if you really enjoy it, you'll find that other people enjoy it just as much as you, as long as you stick to that.
You know, that's probably one of the most original answers I've gotten to this question, which is stay true to, like, you know, the original goals you set out with the story.
Well,
Like, what was
thanks.
that spark? What was that passion? What made you smile when you thought of this idea?
Yep.
Because if you're not smiling the numerous times you talked about, because I always get giddy when I talk about my stories because I'm still passionate about them. If you do not still have that passion, you may want to take a step back and really think hard as like, okay, why did I start this journey in the first place? And that, Darryl, is a perfect ending to this incredible interview. Now, before we officially end, Darryl, again, thank you for coming on the show today. Where can people find and engage with you on social media and pre-order your debut novel, which I forgot to say, what was the title of the book again?
It's The Spilling of Blood. The series is War Torn Realms. Right now it's on pre-order for Amazon for EPUB. We've got the hardback and the softback, or the paperback, being released August 31st. I am going to put it on Barnes & Noble as well, just because Amazon does not have a option for a dust jacket, and I really love dust jackets with science fiction fantasy style books. So I will at least have the hardback with the dust cover on Barnes & Noble. I do have a website. The website's DW Paulk, which is my first two initials of my last name, .com. You can go on there, and I'm also on TikTok, Facebook, Instagram as of right now, and growing.
I will link all those down below in the description of this video. Thank you,
Okay.
my viewers and listeners, for joining us for another author interview here on the channel. Again, a huge thank you to our guest, Darryl Paulk, for coming on the show and telling us all about his upcoming debut novel. Make sure to pre-order the book, and, you know, reviews help, message, anything, and just show some love and support to a fellow author. Darryl, thank you so much for coming on the show, and I
Yep.
wish you the great of success going forward with this book and the sequel and the last one in the trilogy.
I appreciate that. Thank you very much for actually having me on this show, and you know, I'm excited to kind of see this when it goes live. Although I was not kidding. It's very intimidating being on this, so I appreciate you being gentle with my nervousness. So thanks.
No problem, Darryl. No problem. And as always, viewers and listeners, make sure to like and subscribe and comment down below what was your favorite part of the interview. And make sure to go and pre-order Darryl's book, which again will be posted down below in the description of this video. Until next time, this has been the Wandering Scribe and the Wandering Quill signing out, wishing you a wonderful morning, afternoon, evening, whenever you're watching this. Have a wonderful day.